Hello friends and welcome to another video lesson from DBOS Talks. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click subscribe and click the bell so that you can be notified of new uploads. This video is in the playlist called Linux Tutorial, and here we'll be learning about the tail command, the Linux tail command. So this is used to quickly view the last few lines or bytes of a text file in Linux. So very useful when especially working with large files, but also with normal sized files as well. Okay, so but large files, especially those that are log files. Okay, so if we will talk about the syntax of the tail command, it will be something similar to the head command, which you have learned in a previous video. So tail, which is the command, options is followed. Of course, options are optional, but gives you the flexibility of using the command in the way you want it to be used. Okay, and then the one parameter that you have to give it is the file name. Okay, so let me just go to okay, we're already at the directory I wanted to be in. We're in this directory called /home/dbos/exer. Okay, so we're there. And let me just grab the tail command. So if you will do a tail and then happening here. Okay, some slowness. Okay, so tail practice that text. Okay, I didn't really specify uh an option which is like number of lines that you need that I want Linux to display. So I'm just using the tail command without any options and this just passing the parameter of the file name. Okay, so when I do that, such similar to the head command which we have talked about in a previous command video, I mean, when you don't give an option to the tail command, by default, it will display to you the last 10 lines of a file. So in this case, this is the file name. So it is displaying the last 10 lines. You can go through it and it's really 10 lines of text that are being displayed. Again, you will be using this tail command on a text file. So when we say text file, it does not necessarily mean in the realm of Linux and Unix, it does not necessarily mean a file which strictly has the extension of txt alone, because it could be log file, it could be anything. It could be DAT file, it could be really anything, that's CSV, but Linux itself will have the mechanism to go at the OS level to be able to determine if the file is indeed an ASCII or a text file. Okay, so again, used I use the tail command without any options whatsoever, and by default, it gives me the last 10 options of that file. Okay. Okay, let's look at another file which is not as big as this one. So let me just clear it. And then I will say tail. Okay. No. Let me just tail that file first. Tail second file that text. Okay, so again, without specifying any options to the tail command, what I expect the behavior to be is that it will display the last 10 lines of this file. Okay, but surprisingly, it only displays to me 4 lines, one empty and the others non-empty. One, two, three, four lines. This is because the file itself is actually a very small one. So how do we prove that? Okay, so we can do a cat command, which is something I talked about in a previous video. It is a command used to view small text files. So cat and then the file name. And then you can see that indeed what it is displaying to me when I execute the tail command is the entirety of the file. The file itself is very small, it's very short. It only consists of 4 lines of text, including an empty line. All right, so it is doing as expected. So again, without any options being given to the tail commands will display to you the last 10 lines. But in any case, if in case that the file consists of less than 10 lines, then it will just display all of them because it makes sense mathematically. Okay, Now let's specify an option in the tail command to show a specific number of lines. Okay, let me just clear this. And then let's just say, so the syntax for that is something like this. Because earlier we were just using the tail command without any options. So it will behave in the default way, which is to display the last 10 lines. Here, the syntax is I'm specifying the number of lines to be displayed. So tail, and then minus n or hyphen n, followed by the number, and then the file name. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. So let's just say tail minus n, and then maybe 3, and then the file name. What I mean is, I'm using the tail command, I'm passing the hyphen n option, which means number of lines. And what it means is that it works together with this number, which follows it. So I'm telling Linux, display to me the last 3 lines of this file. That's what it means. Okay, let's do it. So I believe you have seen this file. Let me just show it again. Cat practice. So it's not a very short file, but you can see it is doing as expected. So it's supposed to display the last 3 lines, and the last 3 lines are here. And slipped it under the door, a blank line, and then this. And correct, it's the same one. And slipped it under the door, blank line, and serialized. Okay, so that is using the tail command while specifying the hyphen n option for the number of lines. Okay, so it's working as expected. But there's a but here. This is the basic, so you know how to use the tail command in the proper way. But there's a shorter way to do this actually. So you don't have to um, mention the n. So I can go straight to hyphen 3. And then, what's that? Practice. Okay. So it does the same thing without specifying the hyphen n. Instead of the hyphen n, I am saying hyphen 3. It's the same way, interpreted in the same manner by Linux. So you're telling Linux, show to me or display the last 3 lines of this file. Okay. So that's what it does. So that's the quicker way of showing the last 3 lines without having to use the hyphen n option. Now we can, if you've seen my video on the head command, which is very much related to this one, except that it shows the first few lines of a file, while this command, the tail, shows the last few lines of a file. So somewhat related, going on the opposite, working on the opposite ends of a file. Now let's try to learn about this option, which is not called, option to show bytes instead of lines. So in the earlier examples, you've seen me demonstrate the use of the tail command to be able to show the last few lines, specifying or initially using the default behavior and then progressing on to using the negative n or hyphen n option to display the last few lines of the file. Here we will not be doing that. We will instead be using a different option, hyphen C, to show the bytes equivalent to the last few bytes of the file. Okay, so if I give this command, I'm saying show me the last 15 bytes of this file. Again, show me the last 15 bytes of this file. Okay, let's go. So that's it. If you're shocked by the output and you're not so familiar with the tail command and you're not familiar with the concept of a byte, if you're from the good old days, then you would know what it is. It consists roughly of 8 bits. A bit is a binary digit, consists of either a 0 or a 1. Okay, which corresponds to a digital off and a digital on. It's a long conversation. But anyway, whatever text you see here, including the leading space, including the space over here, is counted as 1 byte, roughly. So if you go by estimates, each character corresponds to 1 byte, something like that. Very It's a reasonable approximation. So whatever text you see, including the space here and the space here and the period or full stop over here, they add up, and the total of those characters is 15 bytes. Okay, so that's what it does when you give this kind of option. We use this kind of option in the tail command. Okay, tail hyphen C. Okay, so you can see that the tail command isn't just for showing lines, but also showing the last few bytes. The tail command, however, isn't just for files. It can also be used to limit the output of a command. We can use a so-called pipeline or piping in Linux to use multiple commands. Example, I'll just show you the syntax. So command, whatever shell command you can use in, maybe not all, but lots and lots of shell commands you can use. And then here's the command followed by a pipe. This is called a pipe, which looks like a vertical bar. And then you follow that with the tail command. So that means in this pipeline technique in Linux, what it does is, if you're not familiar with this, the output of the first command becomes the input of the second command. So the second command happens to be the tail command. So what we mean is that the output of the first command becomes the input of the tail command. Okay. So let's just say, okay, let me just go to the root directory and do a list long ls-l. So it's a detailed listing of files and directories at the current location. So you see this much number of files and directories. Okay. So we see that the output is more than 10 lines, as you can see, right? And you also remember, if you do remember that the default behavior of a tail command is that when you do not specify any option, it will display to you the last 10 lines of a file. Okay. In this case, we're not working on a file, we're working on the output of a command. In this case, I'm using a list long command. So let's just see the effect of using the tail command. I'll clear this now. So list long, list long, and then a pipe, and then a tail. So again, this is pipeline or piping in Linux as well as in Unix. So it consists of multiple commands. In this case, I have two commands. The list long, which makes a detailed listing of files and directories at the current location. And whatever is the output of this becomes the input of the second command, which is the tail command. Okay, so that means whatever output of this, the tail command will do its work by just displaying to you the last 10 lines of that output. Okay. Okay, so you don't have to count, but you can if you want to. It will surely only be displaying us the last 10 lines, if there are indeed 10 lines. Meaning, if the output of this list long is less than 10, then we have no choice. It will just display whatever it found if it is less than 10. So in this case, it's displaying 10 lines, but we're not, the tail in this case, in this example, is not being used on a file, but on the output of a shell command, in this case, the list command. All right, so you've learned in this video about the tail command, and you have learned that it has a default behavior of displaying the last 10 lines of a file. And you've also learned that if a file consists of less than 10 lines, then the tail command can do nothing, do not do any kind of magic, but instead just display to you those lines which are fewer than the 10. And then you can also use a couple of options which are the most frequently used options in the tail command. One is the -n, which is for the number of lines, which you can also skip out. And instead of -n, you can go straight and use the number in the hyphen. And the second option you've learned is the -c, which is for the number of bytes. So it will display to you the last few bytes of the file you've specified. And then finally, I've shown you using the pipeline or piping technique in Linux how you can pipe together multiple commands. Here you only saw two, but you can actually have more than two. So whatever is the output of the first command becomes the input of the second command, which in this case, the second command was the tail command. Okay, thank you for watching and listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click subscribe, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.